Hello friends, Tanya here with another video featuring Spellbinders products. I'm going to be using the Propagation Garden release. This is part of the April release. The beginning of this video is going to be all about the assembly. This is the Propagation frames. Propagation Garden frames, I guess, is the full name. And I took all of the dies for the wooden parts and cut them out at once in a half sheet of craft cardstock here. And if I wanted the wood grain to really show up, I probably needed to do the embossing pad also. I'm going to be using the Spellbinders glue bottle, or fine line bottle I think it's called, throughout this video. I am loving this little bottle. It actually gives me way less grief than the Barely Arts bottle, which, okay, don't get me wrong, the Barely Arts bottle doesn't give me a ton of problems, but when it's warm in my craft room, the glue often migrates up the needle tip, even when it's upright, and it does get clogged a little more often. And the glue has to travel a lot farther to get to the tip because it's a much larger bottle. This has been fantastic. I love this little bottle. So they do come in a pack of 2, and I believe they're $4.99 or $5.99. It's pretty inexpensive. And again, I think I mentioned on my last video that if you have troubles with arthritis in your hands and squeezing glue bottles, this is very soft. It's a soft-sided bottle, so it's very easy to squeeze, and it's very easy to control how much glue you're going to get out the tip. I've assembled this frame. It's very easy to assemble. This is the easiest of the 2. I'm adding these little brackets, and of course you could make these different colors. I think they're pictured in black and gold. You just go to town and use whatever colors you want to use. I'm just using the fine tip of my pickup stick here to remove any paper fuzz or glue that's left over. Here are the pieces for the hinged or sawhorse style frame, and you're watching me do this for the first time. I'm figuring it all out as I go, and you can see I have the packaging next to me. I often do that if I have any questions about how to assemble something. Just having a picture of the assembled finished product really does help. Now, in retrospect, I should have either used a Copic marker to color the parts that were supposed to be dark before I assembled this, or I should have used different colored cardstock to die cut those pieces. However, you're going to see that I make this work in the long run. I am just assembling the back of the sawhorse next. I'm using this nice straight, well, it's straight but with angles on each end. Match that up. You can pretty much just tell what goes where by the shape of the space. And there are embossed lines in each of these pieces. Now, if I had used a heavyweight cardstock instead of 80-pound cardstock, the embossed lines would probably have shown up more clearly. Again, it's just fine. They don't have to. And here you can see my one and only misplacement. That thin piece, I had the angled ends aiming the wrong direction. So I'm going to assemble these side pieces first. This really gives the detail of the wooden plank, gives that 3D dimensional look to them. These are the ends of the planks. I was trying to say both words at once. Didn't work out so well, did it? Just going to add the ends of those planks here, and now we're going to put this piece back in the way it belongs. This is very much like a puzzle. You just look and see where each of these pieces fits, and the embossed lines on the base pieces will really help you out. These fit right in there. I was a little worried that I was going to have to have trouble being precise enough to get this to fit together, but there must be just enough wiggle room built in. There it is, all complete. Well, at least the boards part. And there are two little slits cut into this frame that the bar slides through. You can see that I use the end of my tweezer to open those slits up just a little bit more so we can slide this bar through. There's a rounded end on each end of this bar, and it does slide through. This was my first attempt. I was kind of doubtful that it would work, but man, it did. It really surprised me. There are these little crossbars for when you attach your lab bottles or your little glassware, and they work on both of these. Now, this was my solution to fixing the shadow on this. This is some Desert Storm cardstock, and I'm using a Copic marker in E33 to add the shadow to the parts that need to be in the background. Just carefully using this marker to add the color. And yes, I did indeed use my cheaters to do this because I just wanted to be really precise about where the color went. Again, this would be far easier if you used a dark cardstock for the background pieces and for 3 of the pieces on the back part of the sowers. I do come in with the E31 and add some distressing maybe to the front panels. You could do this with ink blending. I just thought it was much easier with the Copic marker. Next, we're going to assemble all of these propagated plants. I took a fistful of green scraps out of my rainbow of paper scraps. I wasn't fussy. I just reached in and grabbed a bunch of small pieces of green cardstock and went to town die cutting all of these different plant pieces. These are the Monstera plants, and don't ask me to know what the rest of them are because I don't think I do. I do know a fair amount of plants, but not as many as the people who are very into the houseplant fad, or not fad, trend. Not even that. I think once you fall in love with houseplants and figure out how to make them work for you, that becomes a lifelong thing. I have a window in my kitchen that my family calls the magic window. It just gets the perfect amount of light, and it's a nice big window, and it happens to be in my kitchen, and I face it when I'm doing my voiceover. Well, my magic window needs a little help. I think I need to repot the 10 or so plants I have sitting in that window. But it's way easier to paper piece your plants. So each of these, I think there's only one of them that has 3 pieces. And I think that's what I'm doing next. I don't know what this plant is called, but we've got the solid base of the plants here, and then we had the leaves, and then there's some vining detail. I really think I should do a nice deep bluey green for the leaves, and then come in with a bluey purpley veining. I know that there are plants that look like that. There is only one of the smaller leaves that's different. The other 2 are the same, and the large leaves are the same. You just have to look for the right pointing, curving tip. With the dies cut out 3 small and 2 large. Same for the veining. There's 2 large, or yeah. Did I say 3? So there's 2 large and 3 small leaves, and your dies will cut out with one pass all of the parts that you need. And the dies are separated, so you can easily separate it in groups of coloring. So you can easily die cut in one pass. Here I'm just adding my little veining. Again, there's one oddball in the small leaves. I shouldn't say oddball, one opposite direction leaf. And that is that plant assembled. Now I think this is called a string of pearls. There is a die that cuts out this background piece and one die that cuts out all of these little pearls to add. And you're just going to add these in a scattering. There's no defined way that you need to do these. I didn't count these. I just started adding dots and adding the pearls, but there are not enough to cover even half of the little spots. Well, maybe it is half. Maybe it's a little less. If you wanted more pearls, you just need to do more than one pass with that die. I decided I was fine with the pearls only being partway, and you could use different colors in different passes. So you could have 2 or 3 different colors or even more of the green pearls here. And I did see someone use this die to create gravel in the bottom of one of the jars. That turned out gorgeous. I bet it took a lot of time. Well, maybe not as much as I think. And that's the finished string of pearls. And next we have the bamboo. There are these shoots that have 2 different layers here, and they're very easy to line up. One shoot points straight up, which I just did. One points to the right and one points to the left. And they assemble very easily. Once you have the pieces laid out, it's easy to tell which one goes where. Now that I have this part assembled, let's attach those to the bamboo stalks. We've got the left facing one. I'm just going to add a dab of glue and attach that at one of the joints on the bamboo. And then we're going to take one and stick it on the top. And you know what? You could use whatever you want. I mean, you could put shoots wherever you want. I'm just going to show you one version here. And you might have noticed that I have 2 sets of each of the plants cut out after I assemble one on camera. And it is, of course, my first attempt at assembling all of these. Then I go ahead and assemble the second one. Now I'm going to apply the roots to a couple of plants here. We're going to take that straight down taproot and attach that. And then we'll attach the wider section of roots. And I use just the taproot on the bottom of that bamboo shoot. Now you can add them in any configuration you want. Next we have the assembly of the laboratory glassware. Now I apologize, I only did I didn't add the little measuring parts. That is a single die. Man, I really wish I had included that, but I am not going to go back and record another piece right now. So first I laid the inset or the fallout pieces and the main piece together and die cut those. And now I'm just cutting the main piece next. So you're going to have this frame that lays right over the main backer piece. I'm going to add some glue to this. I'm being very delicate with this, adding just the barest amount of glue. I'm going to line up the top of my test tube here. Now I will admit that I had messed up lining this up the first time I laid it down, had to peel it off and put it back down. That means my piece is not as in good a shape as it should have been. So keep that in mind when you're watching me assemble this. The inset that I want to look like water, I colored with a B10 Copic marker, no, BG10. Before I inserted that. So I started with white paper for all of this. Now that I have added that piece is complete, and you can see that I've done a round-ended one too. Next, we're going to take the tropical leaves, and we're going to make some 5x7 BetterPressed backgrounds. I found some watercolor cardstock in my stash. We're going to use Thunder this time around. We are using mostly BetterPress inks here. And this is a thin watercolor paper, and it's very textured on both sides. And if I remember correctly, I have tried to watercolor on it, and it has not been very good at watercoloring. So this is a great way to use that watercolor paper. It'll take the impression beautifully, and I don't have to worry about watercoloring on it. I'm sure I got this in a kit somewhere. So if you have a slightly thicker or you have some watercolor cardstock that you feel didn't really work very well for your watercoloring in your stash, this is a great way to use it up. You'll get a beautiful effect and finding a use for something you already have. Next, we're going to try this colorway in this background in tawny brown. I think that turned out beautiful and would match our backgrounds well. Then we're going to try Leaf, which is going to create this beautiful green. And I wanted a more vibrant green, so I pulled out Verdant. It's a VersaFine Clair ink, and I do believe that this is in the Spellbinders shop also. So I'm going to run that through twice, again, turning my plate partway for the second half. And there are 4 gorgeous backgrounds. I think I used 2 of them in this video. Next, we're going to use the wax seals, and this is my 2 colors, 1 seal method. And I'll be honest, I did not get this wax seal warm enough, and I didn't heat up my knife right away. That would have made this a little faster when I'm scraping off the extra gold here. I'm using golden wax beads and citrine in this first version. I put the blade of this palette knife down against the top of the wax chimney because it's hot and it heats up my palette knife. And when I have extra wax on my knife, I just run it against the spoon so it will scrape because it's hot. The spoon is hot also, and that removes the wax off of the knife. Previously, I had been wiping it onto my glass candle stand. That's what that is. You could use a plate even, just something that's going to be cold and easy to, and in non-porous. You can use your silicone mat, but this seems to work well for me. Once I had the hello, I just created the puddle for the wax seal and put the whole thing in it. There I have 2 that are done with 2 colors of wax and 2 that I did with 1 color of wax and the Deco color marker. I discovered another great way to hold your stuff. I have just an egg carton here, just the bottom part of it, and it works fantastic. You could see in the first part of the video I had like a ceramic 6-piece or 6-hole egg carton. Kind of is supposed to be like decor, I think. I picked it up really cheap at Walmart or Target, one of those spots. And I was just enchanted with those deep holes because I've been using paint palettes forever to hold my little pieces. Well, I needed more spaces than 6 spaces. So while I was in my kitchen one day, I had an egg carton that had seen better days on the top. I tend to get my eggs from local egg or chicken people, you know, hobbyists that have several chickens and then need a way to get rid of some of their eggs or just want to earn a little extra money with their chickens. And we reuse egg cartons all the time. Well, this one's top had it, so I cut it off and I brought it up to my craft room and decided to give it a try, and I love it. Here I'm adding the plants to the laboratory glassware, and the roots for this one were a little wide, so I just manipulated them to fit inside this triangular glassware. Now I am lining up my cute little propagated plants with the frame, just trying to figure out where I'm going to add the glue on that bar. Lots of fussing and fiddling here. I know that's how we all create, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to apply this glue. So I figure out where it's roughly going to be, add the glue to the back of the bar, tack that down on our little triangle dude here, or triangular shaped glassware. And this will take the shorter crossbar, just going to adhere that over the bar, looking good. And then I'm figuring out the placement for the test tube. And here I forget that you cannot apply glue upwards. You got to tip your frame over Oh my goodness. Some days you get in the zone and you don't always have the best thought process for some things because you just want to keep your eyeball on where you want to put the glue and you don't think about the mechanics of things. Add in our little crossbar there. And now we're going to add this to, because this frame is actually sized for an A2 size card front. And I'm making, of course, all 5x7 cards. I have a 5.5 by 4.25 inch piece of vellum I'm going to back this with to help mute that background just a little bit and frame this up a little more. It almost looks like a window. Now that I have that all adhered, I'm going to use some white foam strips. I'm going to cut these apart to add behind the leaves of this larger leafed plant. And I don't know if you noticed, but I had some extra strips of cardstock. I think it's just, did I do 2 layers? I think I did 2 layers of extra cardstock behind the frame before I adhered it to the vellum. I have just a couple more leaves here. I'm just pulling these up. This particular die cut, I had a little bit of a struggle getting one of the branches to pull loose from the die, and now it's kind of wobbly, but that's okay. We're gluing it all down. I made it work anyway. I could have thrown that piece away, but as you can see, it does look just fine. One more little piece here. Those strips would have worked to put behind the frame also, but they're 2 millimeter thick, and I wanted this to be much thinner behind the frame. Here is our background that I've cut down to 4 3/4 by 6 3/4. So there's going to be a very thin border around this, and I have a Desert Storm 100-pound cardstock base here. Yes, the space on my desk is very limited. And I think the angle of my camera is a little different on this video. I don't know. Added some extra cardstock behind the frame again, behind the vellum, to pop that up a little bit. I aimed this a little higher towards the top of the card, so there's a little space below the frame. I had originally intended to put a long sentiment down there, and I didn't ultimately do that. I am going to use the green and black 2-tone wax seal to add that, and on the inside I am going to use more of the tropical leaves. These are actually individual BetterPress plates, and they have coordinating dies, which is awesome. So I'm going to use some Desert Storm cardstock or Craft, or you could use Dune or Portobello. Those are by Spellbinders, and those are actually 100 pounds. This is 80 pounds, so you don't get as much of the impression, but it does create a beautifully crisp, detailed image. I die cut those with the coordinating dies, and then we're going to take a couple of sentiments from the Propagation Sentiments stamp and die set. There are dies for a lot of the large sentiments, and a frame one, this, and a little tiny one for the tiny sentiments. Now I did have to stamp this 4 times with this tawny brown. Normally it would have only taken 2, but I realized I had the Spellbinders specialty paper. This was a reverse foil fail scrap, and it was just mixed in with my regular scraps of white cardstock. So yeah, if you're using the specialty cardstock, it's going to take a little more stamping. The specialty cardstock is really designed for hot foiling, for glimmering. So I have 4 layers of cardstock here behind the Thinking of You. I love the way the tawny brown really matches everything. From the background to the sentiment to these BetterPressed leaves on the inside of the card. I'm going to take those leaves. I am using my BetterPress hinge technique again. I shouldn't say the BetterPress hinge. I'm just making sure there's still some of the BetterPress attached to the card base before I go ahead, lift the leaves up, add some glue, and give them some pressure, and peel that BetterPress or not BetterPress, press and seal back. And then we have our sentiment, which I was able to die cut with the little placard or banner die. It has some rounded mitered corners there. And that is card number 1. It actually says it takes a long time to grow an old friend. For card number 2, I am using some 5x7 or A7 layering dies to create a frame. And then I'm going to ink blend this slightly smaller piece of cardstock. There is a 5x7 layering die set in the Spellbinders shop. I have another brand that I use all the time, but a layering die set in the card size that you're using for matting, it really makes a big difference. I did use the Leafy Helix embossing folder on that piece of cardstock I ink blended, and then I decided it needed to match the color of the leaves that are in the background for this card a little better. So I'm using the Verdant ink, the VersaFine Clara Verdant ink, and I could have done direct to paper, but I really wanted to push this ink through to the background a bit also. It is darkest on the raised portions without me even trying to make it that way. Now I'm going to pull out the copper plate Happy Birthday BetterPress plate, and we're going to foil this. I have some, this is satin gold, I think it is, or satin rose gold. It comes in the satin metallics set. That's the only way you can get these satin metallics. There's a matte gold and there's a satin gold. There is a slight difference. So if you're looking at the satin metallics, they come in a set of 4, and this is the darkest of those. So I foiled the Happy Birthday, and now I have what I thought was an A2 size piece of copy paper that I laid on my glimmer plate, laid out my foil plates. Then I can just lay my foil down and then lay a piece of cardstock over the top of that, lining it up with my typing paper background. And I did that in champagne gold. Next, we're going to use the Essential Diamonds dies here, and I'm using the largest of those because that's what's going to fit best on our 5x7 card. I did initially think I was going to add those foiled tropical leaves to the front of the card on the white space of this diamond, but I find that they didn't really fit well there, so I did pass on that, but we're still going to use those. It's time to start assembling the card front. I'm going to take my frame here and adhere that to the Leafy Helix background, and since I cut the Leafy Helix a little smaller, I don't have to worry too much about it hanging out the edges, and I just lay that over the top to create this recessed frame. There is a layer of scrap cardstock behind the frame before I adhered it to the Leafy Helix, and then another layer behind the Leafy Helix. So we've got a little bit of stacking going on, but since I'm using scraps of cardstock, it doesn't really have this mountainous effect to it. It does add a lovely dimension to the card though. Now to attach our diamond, I added a little scrap cardstock in the center of the card and then added dabs of glue on just the corners of our diamond. And now that we have that extra cardstock in the middle, it won't sag and it gives a good anchoring point. Time to move to the inside. I'm going to use 3 of those foiled tropical leaves to create a decorated corner inside our card. And I tried to use 3 very different leaf styles on that corner. We're going to use a sentiment from the Propagation Garden Sentiments again. I'm using my open-sided stamping platform, so I make sure I get this placed where I want it. I'm using a gold pigment ink. I haven't been able to find this brand. I've had this ink pad for probably 15 years, maybe more. And I have a re-inker for it, and it is still going strong. I know Altenew sells one like this. I think scrapbook.com has a gold pigment ink. There are some places you can still get them. We're going to use the Leafy Helix again. This is on to card number 3. And I am attaching the roots to this Monstera plant. I use that deeper root and the wider roots, and we're going to put those in one of the flat-bottomed glassware, laboratory glassware. Again, I didn't use the little measuring lines on the sides. I really wish I had filmed that. I haven't assembled it, but it is a very simple piece that you just add to the edge of the card, or sorry, the edge of the glassware after you die cut it. I have extra cardstock behind this piece of green cardstock that I just embossed. I didn't do anything else to this. And it is, I think this is 4 1/4 by 6 1/4. And then I used another of the 5 by 7 layering dies. This is actually the fallout from that frame that I made on the previous card. So we got 2 cards out of that background. Adding our little plant, I did add extra cardstock behind each of these layers, including behind the laboratory glassware. And I'm adhering the plant directly to the cardstock. If that had been solid leaves, I probably would have put some dimension behind it. We're going to take a couple more sentiments from that Propagation Garden Sentiment stamp set. I have that same green cardstock that I used for the background, and I'm stamping with white pigment ink, and we're going to heat emboss with white embossing powder. This is a great trick to get solid white embossing, to use a white pigment ink instead of the clear embossing ink. I did stamp it 3 or 4 times, but I didn't think you needed to see me do that. It's just the same process. Ink the stamp, push it down, ink the stamp, push it down until you get the coverage that you want. I'm going to die cut the coordinating die, and then I'm taking one of the precision layering slimline dies. I use these for sentiments as much as I do for making slimline cards. It's not available anymore, but if you have it in your stash, this is one of those ways that you can use these layering dies, any of them. And actually the A2 precision layering die sets have small dies in the center also that are the same height, just different lengths, and you can do partial die cutting to create the same effect. Now I have 4 extra layers of cardstock to put behind our sentiment here. The first 2 I'm doing the whole piece, and the last 2 I glued together, trimmed apart, and I'm creating that little bit of balance here, because when it's overlapping on the glass jar, it has less depth needed. On the inside, this I really took inspiration for the inside of this card from the sentiment that I'm using. It says, "Let's root for each other and watch each other grow." So I adhered our sentiment to the card, and now I'm going to go in and add these roots like they're growing out the bottom of this sentiment. I thought that was just such a great imagery for that particular sentiment. This would actually make a great card front. And you could make that strip there a shelf, the sentiment strip, and put some plants growing out of the top of it. Wouldn't that be a clever... Oh, yeah, I think I'm going to have to do that. Like the plants are growing out of the top of this sentiment strip, and the roots are coming out the bottom. This would actually work great for a totally different sentiment, but if you are into horror, you could do some Stranger Things themed cards with these roots growing down. Oh yeah, there's lots of potential for these. Okay, my mind did just wander. I have all of those roots attached, and that completes card number 3. I hope you enjoyed this video. I really had fun creating all of these cards. I was really quite drawn to this Propagation Garden collection. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't done that. Now would be a perfect time. If you're interested in any of the products I use today, they are always listed and linked in the description box below. Using my affiliate links is a great way to help support my channel, and I always am appreciative of that. Leave me a comment. I love to hear from you, always. I don't have time to respond to all of the comments, but I do read every single one of them. Until next time, here are a couple more videos I thought you might enjoy. Bye-bye.